Do you know the ancient Greek myth of Sisyphus, the guy who pushed a rock up the hill only to have the rock fall down on him again and again? For a lot of people, that's what grammar is like. It's an eternal, pointless struggle. So why is grammar such a headache? I think it's the way we're taught. In school, teachers tell us to memorize rules and terms. In their zeal to help us master the technical rules of grammar, teachers often create confusion and frustration. Now, it's important to master grammar, but we need to start with the basic purpose of grammar, rather than memorize a bunch of abstract rules. We can do better, and the trick is to keep it simple. Now it's your turn. What's the absolute worst memory you have of writing or editing a paper or other piece? Try to remember vividly how confusing and frustrating it was. Now, commit yourself to using our simple 3-part approach to mastering grammar. Grammar is really about 2 things. First, there has to be a subject, a person, a place, a thing, a time, an event, a concept. In grammar, that means nouns and pronouns. Second, something's gotta happen. There needs to be action. In grammar, that means verbs. Actually, one more thing. What happens with the subject and the action, the nouns and the verbs, has to be whole and complete. Therefore, consider these 3 simple rules of grammar. 1. Know who's who and what's what. 2. Get the action right. 3. Make everything whole. One last point. To be honest, there are lots of grammar rules and exceptions, and they are complicated and frustrating. But if you master the simple principles here, these complications will come easier. All writing is about some subject. Without a subject, there's no point, in anything. So, start there. Now, there are 2 kinds of subjects. Physical stuff, like people, objects, and places, and ideas, like justice, timeliness, intelligence. No matter what kind of subject or verb we're talking about, every subject is either singular or plural. One or many. Pretty simple, right? It sure looks simple. Singular subjects or nouns go with singular pronouns and singular verbs. Plural subjects or verbs go with plural pronouns and verbs. Let's take this example. Mississippi State won its first College World Series in 2021. Now, Mississippi State is a singular word because it refers to the university, the one entity, Mississippi State University. So therefore, Mississippi State won its first College World Series in 2021. But Bulldogs are plural. Bulldogs is the name of the team. And there's a lot of different Bulldogs out there, the pitcher, the catcher, the shortstop, the second baseman, and so on. They won their first College World Series in 2021. It gets tricky when the noun and the verb and the pronoun are far apart. In this case, they are separated by the phrase, with a fine collection of pitchers. Now, some people might want to say they won their first World Series because the word pitchers, plural, is close to the verb. But to figure out what's the subject, put brackets around the modifiers like this. Then it's easy to see that it's a singular and it deserves a singular pronoun as well as a singular verb. To match subjects and verbs, look at this passage. The first example is easy because the subject and verb are close together. But the second case gets tricky because the subject and verb are far away from each other. Some people mistakenly treat young person as a subject because it's close to the verb, and then they might say the young person shows. But that doesn't make any sense. When we bracket the modifier, we see that the subject is people and the verb is show, plural, plural. To say who's who and what's what, you also need to get the possessives right. Usually, that means just adding apostrophe S, like this: Charles's divorce, the Queen's confidence. Notice that Charles's divorce still takes an apostrophe S, even though Charles ends in S. Do that all the time, except to say who's who and what's what, you also need to get the possessives right. Usually, that means just adding apostrophe S, like this: Charles's divorce, the Queen's confidence. Notice that Charles's divorce still takes an apostrophe S, even though Charles ends in S. Do that all the time, except when a word ends in a double S. In that case, just add an apostrophe. Show the action. Show people doing things as vividly as possible, simply and clearly, without encumbrances. Here's what I mean. First of all, get the tenses right. Use the simple past tense almost always. So, George Washington confessed to his father. Use the past perfect to establish a previous event, an event that happened before the one you're talking about. So in this case, activists volunteered. That's the simple past tense. But you want to give some background for their volunteering. They had been inspired by Dr. King. So use that past perfect to set up the fact that something happened before the event you're talking about. When you use the present tense, you create a sense of immediacy. The question is whether you want immediacy all the time. Also, use the present tense to explain the process. Do this, do that, do the other thing. A series of simple imperatives to understand. We describe a political debate. Don't let any other words get in the middle of your action. Now, modernists say, who cares? They point to the iconic tagline from the TV show Star Trek: boldly go where no man has gone before. Why these modernists mess with that? Here's why. First, remove boldly from the middle of the verb go. It doesn't take away from that iconic tagline. It is better to separate the noun and the verb. Say it, is, instead of it. But when you want to be informed, feel free to use contractions. Don't let any barriers get in the way of your action. Let people see the action without needless complications. purpose of all writing and all art is to create something whole. Every piece of writing should raise some kind of issue and at least address it in some whole way. Use sentence fragments, parts of sentences, not whole sentences, only rarely. In this passage, the author uses fragments 3 times. These fragments make the passage punchier. They make it more like dialogue. Fine, but in general, use complete sentences to express complete thoughts. Avoid the opposite problem too, the sentence that won't quit. Run on sentences, except on rare occasions when you want to describe long and meandering trains of thought that connect the present with the past, or move from the here and now to some imagined or real place, or even describe an event or process that meanders and weaves its way, like a path that winds up a steep mountain and, well, you get the idea. Run-on sentences can be big trouble. They can take you down a path that never ends and that confuse your reader. So, replace something like this with something like this. Break up the long and meandering paths. Sometimes we start a sentence by offering some setup or background information. Fine. But too often, we then talk about something completely different. That's called a dangling modifier. It's a common mistake. This passage seems to say that the film read the book, which of course is not the case. Rewrite it so that the reader can tell exactly who does what. After reading the book, he knew the film would be a hit. Here's the simple lesson. Make everything as tight and complete as possible. Always make it clear who's doing what to whom. Now it's your turn. Writing is really just a series of statements about relationships. Subjects and actions for the most part. Nouns and verbs. Take a few moments and create a brief story based on the relationships of the parts of speech. How do the nouns get along? How do the nouns get along with the pronouns? How do they both get along with the verbs? Be playful.